The ice gave up its secret after 22 years of silence. High on Peru's tallest mountain, at over 17,000 feet above sea level, a mummified body emerged from the melting glacier, perfectly preserved, still wearing his wedding ring, still clutching the dreams that brought him to this remote peak in 2002. Bill Stamfel had vanished into the white fury of an avalanche on Huascarán, leaving behind a wife, 2 children, and questions that would haunt his family for more than 2 decades. His body became part of the mountain itself, frozen in time, waiting for the right moment to return to the world of the living. That moment came on June 27, 2024, when 2 American climbers stumbled upon what they initially thought was just debris on the ice. But this wasn't equipment lost by careless mountaineers. This was a man, a father, a husband who had been missing for 8,030 days. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of loss, preservation, and ultimate discovery, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. This is the remarkable tale of how climate change and melting glaciers brought Bill Stamfel home. June 2002 was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime for Bill Stamfel. At 58 years old, the California civil engineer had discovered mountaineering relatively late in life. He didn't start climbing until his late 40s, but his passion for the peaks burned with the intensity of someone half his age. Standing 6 feet tall with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Stamfel approached every climb with meticulous preparation and deep reverence for the mountains he loved. He said he always felt closest to God when he got to the top of the mountain, his wife Janet would later recall, her voice carrying both pride and profound loss. For Stamfel, climbing wasn't just a hobby, it was a spiritual journey, a way to touch something greater than himself in the thin air above the clouds. Huascarán beckoned like a siren call. Rising 22,205 feet above sea level in Peru's Cordillera Blanca, it stands as the highest peak in the country and one of the most challenging climbs in South America. The mountain's twin summits pierce the sky like ancient sentinels, their faces carved by centuries of wind, ice, and avalanches. For experienced climbers like Stamfel, Huascarán represented the ultimate test, a chance to push physical and mental limits against one of nature's most unforgiving environments. Stamfel wasn't making this journey alone. He had convinced 2 close friends, Steve Erskine and Matthew Richardson, to join him on what they all hoped would be the climb of their lives. The 3 Americans spent months preparing, studying weather patterns, training their bodies, and planning every detail of their ascent. They understood the risks. Huascarán had claimed lives before, and the mountain's reputation for sudden weather changes and avalanche. Danger was well documented among serious climbers. On June 24, 2002, the 3 men were making steady progress up the mountain's treacherous slopes. They had established their camp and were working their way toward the summit, moving carefully across the glacier-covered terrain that makes Huascarán both beautiful and deadly. The weather had been cooperating, and their spirits were high as they climbed higher into the thin air. Then, without warning, the mountain showed its true power. An avalanche, that terrifying wall of snow, ice, and debris that can move at over 100 miles per hour, came roaring down the mountainside. In mountaineering, avalanches are the ultimate equalizer, capable of burying even the most experienced climbers under tons of snow in a matter of seconds. There's no outrunning an avalanche, no negotiating with its raw, destructive force. The 3 friends were caught directly in its path. In an instant, their carefully planned expedition became a fight for survival against overwhelming odds. The avalanche swept them away like leaves in a hurricane, burying them somewhere high on Huascarán's unforgiving slopes. When the snow finally settled and silence returned to the mountain, Bill Stamfel, Steve Erskine, and Matthew Richardson had vanished into the white wilderness, leaving no trace except the terrible knowledge that they were somewhere beneath tons of snow and ice. The search for the 3 missing Americans began immediately after their failure to return triggered emergency protocols. Peruvian rescue teams, along with local guides familiar with Huascarán's treacherous terrain, launched into action despite the dangerous conditions that had just claimed 3 lives. These weren't ordinary missing persons. They were experienced climbers who had vanished in one of the world's most challenging environments, where every hour could mean the difference between life and death. Search and rescue operations on mountains like Huascarán face extraordinary challenges. The altitude makes every breath a struggle. The weather can change from clear skies to life-threatening storms within minutes, and the terrain itself is constantly shifting as glaciers move and ice formations collapse. Rescue teams had to balance speed with safety, knowing that rushing into unstable areas could create more victims. Within days of the avalanche, the first breakthrough came with tragic confirmation. Steve Erskine's body was located and recovered from the debris field, providing investigators with crucial information about the avalanche's path and power. The discovery of Erskine offered some closure to his family, but also intensified the search for Stampfel and Richardson, proving that the avalanche had indeed caught all 3 men. The families back home in the United States were living through every parent and spouse's worst nightmare. Janet Stampfel waited by the phone for updates, clinging to hope while preparing for the worst. It almost was kind of surreal, their daughter Jennifer would later remember. One day he's here and one day he's not, and we don't know where he is. Rescue teams expanded their search patterns using specialized equipment to probe beneath the snow and ice. They brought in avalanche dogs trained to detect human scent even through layers of compacted snow. Helicopters circled the mountain when weather permitted, their crews scanning the white landscape for any sign of the missing men. Local Quechua guides, whose families had lived in the shadow of Huascarán for generations, shared their knowledge of the mountain's hidden dangers and likely locations where avalanche debris might settle. Days turned into weeks as the search continued. The harsh reality of high-altitude rescue operations began to set in. Bodies buried under avalanche debris at such extreme elevations might never be found. The snow and ice that had claimed the climbers' lives now protected them from discovery, creating natural crypts that could preserve remains for decades or centuries. As weeks stretched into months without finding Stampfel and Richardson, the active search phase gradually transitioned into acceptance of a grim reality. The mountain had claimed 2 more victims, and like countless others before them, their final resting places would remain known only to Huascarán itself. The families were left to grieve without the closure that comes with laying loved ones to rest, carrying the weight of uncertainty that would persist for over 2 decades. 22 years later, on June 27, 2024, Ryan Cooper and Wesley Warren were experiencing their own disappointment on Huascarán. The American mountaineers had traveled thousands of miles with dreams of reaching Peru's highest summit, but dangerous conditions had forced their climbing group to abandon their attempt and begin their descent. What should have been a triumphant moment was instead a reluctant retreat down the mountain's treacherous slopes. Climate change had transformed the mountain that had claimed Bill Stampfel's life. Rising global temperatures were causing Huascarán's glaciers to melt at an unprecedented rate, fundamentally altering the mountain's character. "It's basically falling apart. It's just crumbling," Cooper would later tell reporters, describing how the once solid ice formations were becoming increasingly unstable and dangerous. The disappointed climbers decided to take an alternative descent route, one that saw little traffic from other mountaineers. As they carefully picked their way down the less-traveled path at approximately 17,060 feet above sea level, something unusual caught Cooper's eye. Against the stark white backdrop of snow and ice, a dark object stood out like a shadow against the light. Moving closer, Cooper's heart began to race as the object's true nature became clear. It wasn't discarded equipment or natural rock formation. It was a human body, perfectly mummified by the mountain's freezing conditions. The extreme cold and low oxygen environment had created natural preservation conditions that Egyptian embalmers could only dream of achieving. The body was positioned in what appeared to be a defensive crouch, as if the person had tried to shield themselves from the avalanche's devastating impact in their final moments. Despite more than 2 decades of exposure to the elements, the preservation was remarkable. The victim still wore a jacket, climbing boots, and a helmet, all testament to the preparedness that hadn't been enough to save him from the mountain's fury. Most remarkably, a gold wedding ring still gleamed on the mummified finger, a small symbol of love and commitment that had survived the mountain's attempt to erase all traces of human presence. Cooper and Warren carefully searched the body and discovered crucial identification materials that had also been preserved by the frigid conditions: an identification card, a camera that might contain final photographs, and a passport. The name on the identification sent shockwaves through Cooper, Bill Stamfel, the American climber who had vanished in 2002. Here was a man who had been missing for 8,030 days, whose family had spent over 2 decades wondering about his fate, whose children had grown up without knowing exactly where their father's final resting place lay. Someone loved him, and someone wanted him to come home, Cooper told CNN, his voice heavy with the weight of discovery. As soon as I found out he was an American climber, I knew we had a responsibility to track down the family and give them the news. The irony wasn't lost on Cooper and Warren. Their failed summit attempt had led them to one of mountaineering's most extraordinary discoveries. The same climate change that was making Huascarán increasingly dangerous to climb had also revealed its long-held secret, releasing Bill Stamfel from his icy tomb after more than 2 decades of silence. The discovery of Bill Stamfel's remarkably preserved remains immediately set in motion a complex process of verification, family notification, and repatriation that would span continents and involve multiple agencies. Cooper and Warren faced an enormous responsibility. They had stumbled upon not just a body, but a family's long-awaited answer to decades of painful uncertainty. Using the identification found with Stamfel's remains, Cooper began the delicate process of tracking down the missing climber's family. This wasn't a simple internet search. It required careful investigation to ensure they were contacting the right people and approaching them with the sensitivity such devastating, yet potentially healing news demanded. After 22 years, the Stamfel family had likely built their lives around the reality of never knowing their loved one's exact fate. The verification process was remarkably straightforward thanks to the mountain's natural preservation conditions. The extreme cold, low oxygen environment and protective layer of snow and ice had created a natural mummification process that maintained not only Stamfel's physical remains, but also his personal effects. The identification card, passport, and other materials were legible after more than 2 decades, providing undeniable proof of identity. Jennifer Stamfel, now an adult who had lost her father when she was much younger, received the call that would forever change how her family remembered Bill Stamfel. The news was simultaneously heartbreaking and healing, confirmation that her father was indeed gone, but also the promise that he could finally come home. It almost was kind of surreal, she reflected, thinking back to that June day in 2002 when her father had simply vanished from their lives. The family immediately took action to bring their patriarch home. They hired an alpine rescue team specifically trained in high-altitude body recovery operations, understanding that retrieving remains from 17,060 feet above sea level would require specialized equipment, expertise, and careful planning. This wasn't just about closure. It was about honoring a man who had died pursuing his passion and ensuring he received the burial he deserved. On July 5, 2024, the professional rescue team successfully extracted Stamfel's remains from Huascarán. The operation required careful coordination between Peruvian authorities, international rescue specialists, and the grieving family. The team had to navigate the same treacherous conditions that had claimed Stamfel's life, working at oxygen levels that make every physical task exponentially more difficult. The role of climate change in this discovery cannot be overstated. Scientists studying glacial retreat in the Andes have documented dramatic ice loss across the region, with some glaciers shrinking by over 50% in recent decades. What had once been Stamfel's icy tomb had gradually melted away, exposing his remains to the elements and, ultimately, to discovery by fellow climbers. The camera found with Stamfel's body represents a particularly poignant element of the discovery. While details about its contents haven't been publicly released, the device potentially contains the final photographs taken by a man pursuing his greatest passion. These images might show Huascarán through Stamfel's eyes in his final days, capturing both the beauty that drew him to such heights and perhaps the dangerous conditions that would ultimately claim his life. The successful recovery also highlighted the ongoing mystery of Matthew Richardson, Stamfel's climbing partner, who remains missing somewhere on Huascarán. Richardson's family continues to hope that changing glacial conditions might eventually reveal his remains as well, providing them with the same closure that the Stamfel family finally achieved after 22 years of uncertainty. Bill Stamfel's journey home began with his transport to Lima, Peru's capital, where his remains underwent the necessary preparations for international repatriation. After more than 2 decades frozen in time on Huascarán slopes, the process of returning him to his family required careful coordination between Peruvian and American authorities, ensuring that all legal and logistical requirements were met for this unprecedented situation. The decision to cremate Stamfel's remains in Lima was both practical and meaningful. Cremation would allow his ashes to be transported home to his family in California, where they could finally lay him to rest in a place where loved ones could visit and remember. For Janet Stamfel Raymer, who had spent 22 years as a widow without a grave to visit, this represented the closure she had never dared hope to receive. The discovery sparked conversations throughout the mountaineering community about climate change's unexpected consequences. Huascarán's rapidly melting glaciers are revealing not just Bill Stamfel, but potentially other climbers who have vanished over the decades. The mountain has claimed numerous lives throughout its climbing history, and rising temperatures may continue to release long-held secrets from the ice. For Ryan Cooper, the climber who made the discovery, the experience fundamentally changed how he views both success and purpose in mountaineering. "I realized I wasn't meant to summit," he told the New York Times. "I was meant to find Bill." His failed attempt to reach Huascarán's peak had led to something far more meaningful than personal achievement. He had given a family the gift of closure and the opportunity to properly honor their loved one. The story also highlighted the tight-knit nature of the mountaineering community, where climbers from different countries and generations share common bonds forged by their love of high places and understanding of inherent risks. Cooper's immediate recognition of his responsibility to contact Stamfel's family demonstrates the unwritten code among serious climbers, that they look out for each other, even across decades and continents. Jennifer Stamfel and her family now face the bittersweet process of planning the funeral they never had the chance to hold. After 22 years of grieving without closure, they must now navigate the complex emotions that come with finally laying a loved one to rest. The little girl who lost her father in 2002 is now an adult who can finally say goodbye properly. The impact extends beyond one family's closure. Stamfel's story has become a powerful reminder of both the risks inherent in pursuing dangerous passions and the unpredictable ways that nature can preserve and reveal the past. His perfectly preserved remains serve as a testament to the mountain conditions that make high-altitude climbing so challenging, while his discovery offers hope to other families of missing climbers that their loved ones might someday be found. The wedding ring that survived 22 years on the mountain now returns to the family as a symbol of enduring love and commitment that even death and time could not diminish. The story of Bill Stamfel's discovery after 22 years trapped in Huascarán's ice reveals profound truths about human determination, the power of nature, and the unexpected ways that closure can arrive in our lives. His tale reminds us that the mountains we love can be both cathedral and cemetery, offering spiritual transcendence while demanding ultimate respect for their deadly power. Climate change, often discussed in abstract terms of rising sea levels and melting polar ice caps, took on deeply personal meaning through Stamfel's emergence from the glacier. The same global warming that threatens ecosystems worldwide became the mechanism that returned a father to his children, a husband to his widow's memory. It's a stark reminder that environmental changes have consequences that ripple through individual lives in ways we never anticipate. For mountaineers worldwide, Stamfel's story reinforces the fundamental truth that every expedition into high places carries inherent risks that no amount of preparation can completely eliminate. Yet his discovery also demonstrates the mountaineering community's unwavering commitment to bringing their own home, even when that journey takes more than 2 decades. The preservation of Stamfel's remains, his identification, even the wedding ring that gleamed after 22 years in the ice, speaks to the power of human connection to transcend time and death. His family's immediate action to bring him home, and Ryan Cooper's recognition of his responsibility to contact them, illustrates how bonds of love and community duty persist across years and continents. Perhaps most remarkably, Stamfel's story transforms a failed summit attempt into something far more meaningful than any personal achievement. Cooper's disappointment at not reaching Huascarán's peak dissolved when he realized his true purpose on the mountain that day. Not to conquer a summit, but to solve a mystery that had haunted a family for over 2 decades. As Bill Stamfel finally returns home to California, his story serves as both cautionary tale and testament to the enduring power of love, community, and hope. Somewhere on Huascarán, Matthew Richardson still awaits discovery, a reminder that the mountain holds other secrets that may yet be revealed. If this remarkable story of discovery and closure moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigations into mysteries that span decades. Share your thoughts about Bill Stamfel's incredible journey in the comments below. This is a story that proves some mysteries are worth waiting 22 years to solve.